Hi guys, my name is Bobby. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm bringing you my October wrap-up. My totally underproductive, shitty, slumpy October wrap-up. So as I've said before in multiple videos, I've been slumping all of 2020, and October was no exception. It started out okay. I started with our buddy read, our why can't I talk today? Our random reads book club that Vicky and I run. We were reading in October. We had our pick and it goes all the way through November, and then, you know, you have 2 months to read, blah, blah, blah. I've said all this before. I obviously don't have thoughts put together, not very coherent today, which I should be considering. I have 2 hours to myself right now. So I'm going to film and I'm going to catch up on BookTube and I'm so excited. But anyways, that's beside the point. So we have our book club, and they're, what do we call it? Like bi-monthly? I guess that's the way to put it. We put out a new book every 2 months, which I need to message Vicky because she needs to put out our pick for December in the Goodreads group. The Goodreads group is always linked down below. You're welcome to join whenever you want. You don't have to read what book that we're reading. We read a book every 2 months, so our next pick is coming up in December. You won't find out on YouTube until I announce my December TBR. But yeah, so the book we picked for that threw me into a slump. I started out reading it, it was good, and then it just went all downhill from there, and I only ended up reading 3 books this month, which was the same as I read in September, and I hate myself. So yeah, this shouldn't be too long. Hopefully I can ramble at a smaller amount than I normally do, but I doubt it, because I have a lot of thoughts on The Hunger by Alma Katsu, or this side. Usually I do it on this side. Yeah, I didn't like this book. I gave it 2 stars. So this was our random reads book pick for the month of October. The Hunger is a horror retelling of The Donner Party. So if you don't know what The Donner Party is, Google it. But for the gist of The Donner Party is it takes place in the late 1800s. And this was a group of people who were making the crossing from, was it Indiana or Illinois? No, I think it was further south. I don't remember. I'm trying to block this book from my mind. But they are making the crossing over the mountains to go to California. It's like the Western expansion. And this group left later than a lot of the other people left. So they were getting kind of a late start. They're moving kind of leisurely. The leaders, like, of the wagon train had a lot of excess shit that they didn't necessarily need to bring that kind of slowed the train down. They took a lot of extra breaks and all that stuff. And so it got to a point that when they were making them cross, the mountain crossing, when they were going across, winter hit because they didn't get into the mountains till like September, which if you go up into the higher elevations, especially with these mountains, and I don't remember which mountain range it is. Is it the Rockies? Ugh, don't quote me on that. I'm really bad at geography. But when they make the mountain crossing, they get stuck in the snow. They ended up stuck there, and a lot of people died, but there was quite a few that survived as well. But the party had to resort to cannibalism in order to survive, and so that was like a big deal. And you know, of course, that's very scandalous, and it was obviously for survival. So these people didn't really have a choice. So with The Hunger, she decided to do a horror retelling of the Donner Party, and I was excited because I like historical fiction, and especially retellings of historical events, because you already kind of know the base knowledge of the historical event. So it's kind of fun to see how the author interprets their version of it and, you know, changes it up and see what's different. So we start out and they're going across the plain. We follow so many people, and I think that was a detriment to this story. There's so many point of views. I think there's like 6 or 7. I mean, I lost count at how many point of views there are, and not all of them are integral to the story, so it seemed like kind of a waste of time, and it really bogged down the story. Like, nothing really exciting happens to like the last 100 pages, so you're slogging through this book where nothing's really happening. I mean, in the first like 20 or 30 pages, there's a death. A little boy is killed and maimed, and you're just going, oh, okay, well, now the horror's starting and nobody knows what happened or what's going on. And that was like, okay, good, we're getting into it. But then nothing else happens for a long, long time. And I'm going to have some mild spoilers in here. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to fucking spoil it. So if you don't want spoilers, then skip ahead till when it's not on the screen, because I read this on ebook. I bought it on ebook. And I'm glad I did, because I don't want it on my shelves. I would just end up unhauling it. It's safer on my Kindle, I guess. But so you have like Tamsin Donner, which, you know, is the wife of George Donner. They kind of interpret her as a witch. And there's nothing to really show that she is a witch. I I mean, she does like some herbal remedies and shit like that, but everybody thinks she's a witch and like all this stuff. And they make her out to be like this promiscuous whore, which her actual person that she was based off of was not like that. There was another character, I can't remember his name, who this Amakatsu put as gay, which there was no proof in history that he was gay at all. In fact, he was one of the ones that helped. He was a survivor of the whole incident, and he went on to live like a really nice life and like all this stuff. It had multiple children. I mean, granted, back in those days, if you were gay, that's just what you did. But a lot of people felt that it was kind of slandering their names, even though they're long dead, because, you know, he was not gay, and to try to say that he is to kind of add the diversity, it just didn't make sense. You're doing a historical retelling of an event that actually happened. You don't need to, in my opinion, I guess, you wouldn't need to force diversity if it doesn't exist, because these people actually existed. They're not fictional characters. So the big bad was kind of zombie-ish in a way, and it reminded me a lot of The Troop by Nick Cutter, if you've read that, except for it wasn't worms, but the same kind of thing where they're hungry all the time, and that's where the cannibalism comes in, where when they're infested with this thing, this spirit, and it's an ancient Indian spirit or Native American spirit, they eat other people, and it was not scary. It just wasn't scary at all. And then you have this other guy who likes to beat the shit out of people, but he's actually a child predator. Like he's a pedophile, and he like molests and rapes young children, especially girls. Like that didn't need to be in there. So it was like every single person she made sure had something nasty in their background, or they were a horrible human, to kind of justify their deaths. And it was just, I didn't like it. And I'm sorry that was kind of all over the place. I read it at the beginning of the month, and I've since tried to push it out of my mind. It was 2 stars. It wasn't good. But this one really dragged down my reading. Like, I started out the month, I was like, okay, I'm good. I had buddy reads planned. I was all set to go. And then this one just this tanked my month. Totally tanked my month. So yeah, 2 stars, wouldn't recommend. Next book I finished was Famine by Laura Thalassa. This is book 3 in the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse series. It's a mouthful. Book 4 is Death. Not sure when we're getting it. I'm pretty sure in sometime in 2021. But this was my favorite so far. I have said before with reading Pestilence and War that at each one I've liked more and more. In Becca's Patreon Discord, like I was talking to another person in there who she has read now all of the 4 Horsemen books. So she was messaging me and talking to me about them as she read them. She also agrees that Famine is her favorite, but she liked Pestilence more than War, where I liked War more than Pestilence. Each one gets better and better. Now, if you want to read these are a paranormal romance, I would say. Like, they are a fantasy romance. I mean, it's the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, so definitely dystopian, like, romance as well, because, you know, they're in the apocalypse. But you have to read them in order. You can't just pick and choose, because the way Famine ends, you have to read Pestilence and War before you get to the end of Famine. So I would highly recommend reading these in order. Pestilence and War, I guess you don't necessarily, but stuff is said in War about Pestilence, like you need the context. So I would highly recommend reading them in order. They are a series for a reason. But Famine was really, really good. So Famine takes place in Brazil. So Pestilence was Canada, northern Canada, and came down the western United States. War took place in Jerusalem area, so the Middle East. And then Famine takes place in Brazil. And I think Death is going to be all over the place after the ending of Famine. But yeah, so Famine takes place in Brazil. Our main female character is Anna. And Anna, like, I like what Laura Thalassa does with her female leads, because each one is different. I mean, the structure is the same. It's a girl in the middle of the apocalypse. She's always alone. She's like by herself, and comes in contact with the horseman, and the horseman ends up falling in love with her. She ends up falling in love with them, vice versa, whatever. And that's where you get the basis. So each one is pretty much exactly the same in that format, to where she's got the structure, but she makes them so very different. Like in Pestilence, Sarah tries to kill Pestilence, and therefore, like, he has like this, something happens to where he decides to keep her as a prisoner, and then they go about their merry way and all their shit happens. Then in War, you have War and Miriam, where Miriam, like, builds weapons and, you know, has always fended for herself and has done really well. And when War invades Jerusalem, where she lives, she is running and trying to hide. War comes up on her. She tries to kill him. And then when he sees her, he calls her wife and then takes her. And so that was very different from Pestilence. I mean, kind of the same scenario a little bit, but he calls her wife and she was like, what the fuck? And she could understand what he was saying, even though he was saying it in the angel dialect. I mean, so different. With Famine, we start out and Famine has come into the small town where Anna lives. Anna is a prostitute. She works in a bordello, is how she puts it, like a house of ill repute. She works in a bordello, and, you know, you don't really get much of her backstory at first, but Famine is there, and Famine takes out the biggest house possible, and then, you know, he has all the townspeople come and give him gifts. And so she is going with her madam to be his gift. And so they go into this house, and in her inner dialogue, we hear that she knows Famine, and she's come into contact with him before. I think it was 5 years before, or wasn't 10. I think it was like 5 years. Maybe it was like 7. It was enough to, she's an adult now. She's like 20, 21-ish. And when she ran into Famine the first time, she was a teenager, like 15, 16 maybe. So maybe like within 5 to 10 years. Probably closer to 7. But she came into contact with him before, and I was like, what? You know, like he was roaming around before because all the horsemen had been roaming, but just kind of keeping quiet until their turn. So you kind of have this going, well, what do you mean you've ran into him before? So when she comes in front of Famine, she expects him to recognize her, and he does not. So she gets the same fate as everybody else. Quick spoiler for the very beginning of Famine. What Famine does is he has these people who are working for him, which are just big men that come from the town that he's currently in, and he doesn't spare anybody. He's very brutal, way more brutal than War Pestilence. He takes them out back, and he has had a big pit dug, or if there was a swimming pool, and he has his men stab these people to death and throw them into the pit, even whether they're dead or dying, and they have to lay there on all these bodies and pretty much die. So this happens to Anna and her madam. Her madam dies instantly, but Anna does not die. Obviously, she's the main character. So she's stabbed multiple times in the chest and belly area, and she feels like she's dying, but then there's like this something that comes over and like saves her and pretty much heals her wounds-ish, and she's able to climb out of the pit, and, you know, she hides, Famine leaves, and she goes to follow him, and the story kind of goes from there. What I enjoyed about this one is that she had met Famine before, and it kind of made their bond a little different. Famine is a lot more harsh, I guess. He doesn't have as much humanity as Pestilence and War do, because Pestilence, like, you know, he just causes sickness, and so he was kind of like how I described him, as like a dumb baby. Like, he doesn't seem to understand human emotion or whatever, and he's kind of like a little infant. Like, he was a virgin when he met Sarah. Like, very different dynamics. With War himself was born from human emotion, like anger and wrath, and which are the same things. War, you know, the strong emotions that come with being in war. So he understood, like, he was not a virgin. He understood a lot of human emotions, especially anger and the protectiveness and stuff like that, and fighting for what you want. So he was obviously had way more humanity. With Famine is the least close to any kind of human emotion or way of being. Famine is about plants and, you know, crops and trees and everything nature-esque. So each horseman has certain powers that they have. Famines, which I mean, obviously he can kill or grow crops. Like, they have a positive and a negative to their power. So he can kill crops just by walking by. They right in line with him, they will just die. Or he can make them grow, vice versa. You know, he could do either or. He also can control the weather, which is really cool. So when he's angry or upset, it's like thunder and lightning, pouring down rain. Like, you know, he can control the weather, which is really, really cool. When it comes to healing, because Pestilence and War can heal better than Famine can, what Famine can do is he can heal, yes, but it's more like the same as growing or killing plants, where like he has to like somehow worm his way, like conscious-wise, inside of you to find what's hurting or what's killing. And, you know, like to kill like a crop, that infection or whatever it is that's trying to kill you, or make it grow. Like, you know, it's a lot harder for him than it is for War Pestilence. And how Famine kills, he kills with plants, which was kind of terrifying. Like, he'll make things grow out of the ground and they will like wrap you up. It reminded me a lot of kind of The Ruins by Scott Thomas. No, it's not Scott Thomas, is it? But they grow out of the ground and they wrap around you, and they either can crush you to death, where they like break your bones, but you can stay there suffering forever, or they can crush you completely and kill you. It's kind of terrifying. And he can grow them anywhere, so that was rather terrifying. And so like Famine made the comment that he has less humanity because he's so in with the plants and like animals and like stuff with famine or apocalypse. Like he can control like locusts and stuff like that you would see in the Four Horsemen, like biblical stuff. So he's more in tune to them. So because of that, like his human emotions are lacking, to say the least. But when it comes to Anna, they met when she was a teenager. She was walking home from, like, I don't know if it was a market or whatever, had some fruit with her, and she saw what appeared to be a body laying off the side of the road. She goes to inspect. It was Famine. He'd been beaten. He was horrible. He was pretty much in pieces, but he was still breathing because, of course, the Four Horsemen cannot die. They can be mutilated, maimed, blown up, whatever. They will always come back and come back together. It just takes them a while to regenerate depending on how badly they're injured. And so she drags him into an abandoned house and literally sits with him while he heals, where she could have tried to kill him worse or just left him, and she didn't. And so when Famine finally remembers, when she tells him after she finds him and says something to him, and he gets it, and they end up going on together. It was an interesting dynamic because she already knew him before, and that made their dynamic a little bit different because it was like for him, with having no humanity, why did you save me? You didn't have to help me. And that kind of helps prove that not all humans are bad. Like, she obviously had compassion for this thing that's trying to kill everybody, yet she still had compassion and didn't think he should be suffering like that. And as the story goes, it's really, really good. I loved Famine. Was it 5 or did I give it 4? I think I gave it 4. I've given all of them 4 stars, but it was so good, so much better than the other ones. I highly recommend Laura Thalassa. She wrote the Bargainers series, which I absolutely loved. But this month I'm taking a break from fantasy romance. I say that, but I'm reading Sarah J. Maas right now. But at the same time, like, you know, not the hardcore fantasy romance, because I'm kind of fantasy romanced out from reading 5, 6, 8 Laura Thalassa books in like the past couple of months, so I need to like simmer it down a bit. But still, I loved Famine. I'm sorry that was kind of jumbly all over the place, but it was so good. The way the ending, I don't want to spoil the ending. Little hint though, Death shows up at the ending, in his form, like on Earth, not like the ending of War or Pestilence where it was a little different. And shit starts to get nasty. So it was so fucking good though. So I highly recommend those. If you're okay with the tabooness of the Stockholm Syndrome a little bit, you know, especially in Pestilence, it's not so much, a little bit in War, but definitely not in Famine. I wouldn't say there was Stockholm Syndrome in Famine because he initially tried to kill her and she went after him and then decided to go with him. And so it was a little different for Famine. But, you know, and Pestilence was definitely very much a Stockholm Syndrome case, more so than War or Pestilence. Or, I mean, War and Famine. But I highly recommend the series. Very graphic and gory when it comes to death. There's graphic sex, of course. Though I do appreciate Laura Thalassa for when she writes her sex scenes. They don't happen, like, immediately. It's not like these people met and then they automatically start fucking. It is way longer into the book. Like, they develop some kind of a relationship first before the sex happens. I appreciate that. Even in an apocalyptic book, it's still appreciated because it's more real. Like, these people actually get to know each other first before they have sex. So, anyways, I've rambled on enough. 4 stars. I highly recommend it if you're into fantasy romance at all. Okay, and the last book I read this month, I gave it 3 stars, I think, and that's Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. This was the first book she ever wrote, I believe. I think this is her debut, and I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't my favorite. This tells the story of a woman, I can't even remember her name, Camille, who is an investigative reporter. She has to go back to her hometown to investigate some deaths that have been happening, and she has to stay with her mother, who she doesn't have a good relationship with, and shit starts happening. So I gave it 3 stars because what the bad thing was, and it wasn't, the killer was fine. The killer was kind of a twist at the end where I saw it coming, but it was kind of a nice little surprise. Like, I mean, Gillian Flynn was the master of twists when, you know, everything, Gone Girl. I mean, that was like the first big, oh my God, twist in a thriller. But yeah, like this, I could see it coming. the mom was really creepy and abusive and just, ugh, like, ugh. Gillian Flynn's really good at writing really nasty, icky characters that just make you feel, ugh. You know, they're just gross in every sense of the word. But I don't want to spoil this. I didn't like the reasoning behind the killings, if that makes sense. I guess the motive. Nowadays, if this was written, it would not be as popular as it was because of the way we view certain things. I can't even say what it really is, because if I do, it's really easy to figure out and I don't want to spoil it. But I can't think of how to describe it without ruining it, and I don't want to ruin it. I mean, this is a very short book, so I do not want to ruin it. I mean, I don't think it's 300 pages if I remember right. Yeah, it's like 250 pages. Like, I can't see, how do I put this? The issue in this book that caused the killing has been very prominent within the last couple of years with a major case that came forward. Do with that what you will. And it's a subject, that's a safe word. It's a subject that I find highly interesting. So I like to read or watch things that deal with it because I find it very fascinating. And the way this was done was okay, but I don't think that it would fly necessarily today because, I mean, when was this published? I mean, this was Gillian Flynn's first book, so 2006. So that was 14 years ago. Today, it probably wouldn't fly. The reasoning behind the killings, yeah, that's about all I can say about it. Like, I don't want to ruin it, but I gave it 3 stars because of the reasoning behind the killings. Like, the way the story was structured is very creepy and icky feeling and very, you know, she's very atmospheric in her writing, and you always have that dread, that feeling of dread while you're reading her books, and that I really appreciated. But the twist and the reasoning behind the killing and what happened and all of that is the reason it was 3 stars. I wish it was something different. And that's all I'm gonna say, because I don't want to ruin this. Like, this is better to go in not knowing much about it. Most thrillers are. But this, again, kind of goes with the, why can't I find a thriller that shocks me? That's why I haven't read many thrillers at all this year, because I read so many last year and none of them have, you know, been more than 3 stars, really. Like, haven't really got me. So I was like, I have to read a spooky book this month. So this was it, and it was only 3 stars. Okay, guys, that's it. That is my October wrap-up. The 3 books that I read, because I'm trash. And I'm been in a really good reading mood the last couple of days. Like I said, I finished a book that I've been working on for a couple of months, and I really enjoyed it. I've picked up the next book in that series. And so I'm feeling a little bit more motivated. There's a lot of stuff still going on in my personal life that's been kind of thrown everything up in the air. Hopefully it calms down soon. Probably won't, but you know, whatever. So, but I'm just trying to escape with like the elections and everything going on. Yesterday, I got off a graveyard shift and like I couldn't sleep. I kept having nightmares. So I watched a couple of things on TV, like just booktube-ish stuff. And then I just sat and read all day, and it was nice. I put on an ambiance room and just sat there and just read and finished the book, and it was really nice. So I've been kind of in a reading mood. It's been really good to escape into a book, so I'm gonna run with that mood. And like I said, November is mood reading for me. I'm just gonna mood read. I picked a stack of books that I really want to get to, and I'm just gonna mood read. So yeah, let me know what you read in the month of October. I'm curious, like, did you read any good horror or thrillers that I need to know about? Because I'm severely lacking in that lately. Like, looking at my shelves, I don't really have much on there for thriller or horror. And I think most of the reason of that is because I just haven't had good experiences with them. So like my book of the month and stuff, I haven't been picking the horrors or thrillers because I'm just like, it's probably not going to be good. It's only going to be 3 stars. So if you read any in the month of October or lately, please let me know in the comments down below. I want to know what you guys have been reading and whether they're good and should I pick them up. Also, if you've read any of the books that I've read this month, please let me know in the comments below what you thought of them. I always love interacting with you guys. I forgot, I'm going to add this in right here, right before the end. I just finished filming and I forgot to mention, big shout out and thank you to Sarah from Sarah's Nightstand for shouting me out in her Booktubers I'm Thankful For video. I really appreciate it. I woke up this morning to like 5 or 6, 10 new subscribers. I'm not sure. I didn't even look at my count, but I really appreciate it. And if you're coming here because of Sarah, hi, welcome. Sorry, I fucking swear a lot. She was not wrong about that. I appreciate her disclaimer. Welcome to the shit show. I'm chaotic. I try to post at least once a week, but I've got a lot of stuff going on in my personal life right now. Like I mentioned it in almost every video. So my reading has been slumping a lot this year, and I've been struggling to get content out because I've been really busy with other things, Corona, family, whole bunch of shit going on. So just to let everybody know, hi, welcome. Hope you like it here. We're all pretty nice, most of us. I like my little group. But yeah, I just wanted to, you know, say thank you to Sarah for the shout out. It was really nice and sweet, and I had kind of a bad night last night, so it was a nice thing to wake up to. So again, hi if you're here because of Sarah, welcome, and back to my outro. But that's all I got for you today, so I guess I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.